right. Now, what was he doing in there?
How should I know? Okay, be careful. Look, we heard a game of mazes and monsters got a little out of hand over at the university.
15 seconds, bud.
Mazes and monsters?
Right. You know how to play it?
My kids play it. I know the game.
Well.
All right, up
5
here.
seconds. Let's go.
This is Bud Hayden, live from Pequod Characters, where I'll be reporting on the apparent disappearance of a Grant University student, the victim of a seemingly innocent game, Mazes and Monsters. Now, Mazes and Monsters is a fantasy role-playing game in which the players create an imaginary character. These characters are then plunged into a fantasy world of invented terrors. The point of the game is to amass a fortune without being killed. It's kind of a psychodrama, you might say, where these people deal with problems in their lives by acting them out. But in this case, there might be a loss of distinction between reality and fantasy, and possibly the loss of life in the process. I'll be back in 3 minutes with another live report.
Welcome to the Greenwood. I'm your host, Thaddeus Papke, and this is the podcast where we peek under the hood of the most famous outlaw who may have never been. From archers to archaeologists, we interview subject matter experts and content creators to learn why this figure continues to endure and consider what we can learn by examining what historian Maurice Keene called the matter of the Greenwood. That audio clip you heard at the very beginning is how the 1982 film Mazes and Monsters begins. Now, this isn't the first time that I've used that clip as the cold open for a media project. Back in college, I made a short documentary about how role-playing games were represented in media and on the news. Of course, this was before Stranger Things, The Big Bang Theory, or even Freaks and Geeks, for anyone who remembers that from the early 2000s. Back then, there wasn't a lot out there, aside from the Dungeons & Dragons Saturday morning cartoon, and this one low-budget TV movie starring a young Tom Hanks, with a plot that was inspired, not by the actual disappearance of college student James Dallas Egbert III, but by the sensationalist and fully fictitious reporting that linked his disappearance to the, at that time, still extremely new game of Dungeons & Dragons. Now, Dungeons & Dragons was created in the mid-70s by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson as an extension of their love of miniature wargames. It basically started by asking, what if each player was controlling a single heroic persona instead of a squad of soldiers? While the fantasy worlds that they created to put these heroic personas in were clearly influenced by the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, Gygax and Arneson were also strongly influenced by other popular fantasy writers, including Robert E. Howard, Michael Moorcock, and Paul Anderson. And so, Dungeons & Dragons, or D&D, was born, with wizards and warriors, elves and orcs, and a heavy emphasis on combat and specific goals. Goals such as the acquisition of treasure. Treasure that was typically acquired through combat, usually with various monsters. And while D&D is still, by far, the most well-known example of what we now call tabletop role-playing games, or ttrpgs, by the early 80s, creative individuals were taking that idea of playing a game where you embody an imagined character and getting it well removed from the ideas of treasure hunting and dungeon delving. As for myself, like most people who have played role-playing games, my introduction was Dungeons & Dragons. Specifically, the now famous Red Box basic set released in the early 80s. Over the years, I've played at least a little bit of every iteration of D&D that has existed, and am enjoying playing a sort of a fungally inclined dwarf druid in a campaign right now. However, D&D has always been the game that I've been happy to play, but never the one I especially want to play. What really got me into role-playing games was the sort of punky and angst-filled, hidden world urban fantasy games like Werewolf the Apocalypse and Changeling the Dreaming. It was through joining a group that played live-action versions of those games that I met some of my very best friends, including Rick, who joins me for each Splitting Arrows episode of the podcast. Discovering the games of Call of Cthulhu and Pendragon taught me how role-playing games could also be meticulously researched vehicles for emulating certain literary genres. And while D&D certainly helped inspire the use of dice as a means of introducing randomness for the sake of conflict resolution, game designers have also introduced playing cards, Jenga towers, and a whole lot of other mechanical innovations to help foster the idea of collaborative storytelling that is at the heart of these role-playing games. We have discussed before on this podcast how whenever there has been a new form of popular media, it hasn't taken long for someone thought to use it for bringing the Greenwood of Robin Hood to life. Even before my mother purchased me that basic D&D set with the evocative art by Larry Elmore of a warrior slashing his gleaming longsword towards a towering crimson dragon, fantasy author Catherine Kerr had written a Robin Hood role-playing scenario for Dragon magazine. And by 1987, Robin Hood, the role-playing campaign from Iron Crown Enterprises that used the Rolemaster system, would be published. Now, fast forward to 2025, and tabletop role-playing games are more popular than ever. They're also being taken more seriously than ever. At a professional conference for science communicators that I attended this summer, there was a session I helped organize about how ttrpgs can be useful training tools to develop communication skills. And there was a whole other session about using role-playing games to not just promote, but help teach and instill concepts relating to ethics, science, and activism. My guest for this episode is Graham Rose, who has written a brand new Robin Hood-themed role-playing game that will be out later this year. As you'll hear, he had a lot of thoughts about what he wanted to convey with his own take on inviting players to inhabit the roles of outlaws trying to get by in the forests of medieval England. We'll also showcase his system by including a live build of what it's like to make a character for the new game, The Hooded Man. So string your bow, roll for initiative, and join me in the Greenwood with RPG creator Graham Rose.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm quite excellent. I've been having a very fun and interesting week.
Okay, that's good, I think.
Yeah. And I'm really excited and happy to talk to you. I've actually really been sort of on the lookout for a good Robin Hood role-playing game for quite a while.
Me too.
Right, so
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
jump right into it. My guest joining me here in the Greenwood is Graham Rose, who is the author of the upcoming tabletop role-playing game, TTRPG, The Hooded Man, right? From Osprey.
Yes, hi, Thaddeus. Yeah, yeah, which I'm very excited about. It's the second role-playing game I've done for Osprey. My first being Paleomythic, which was more Stone Age, stone and sorcery. In that case,
You don't see a lot of Paleolithic role-playing games out
no,
there, I have
no,
to
no,
admit.
no. I'll be the first to admit it was probably a bit niche, but has some fans, which I'm very pleased about. So, and this game, The Hooded Man, it shares a lot of the same lineage in terms of the game mechanics and so on, but obviously it's a very different subject to Paleo. Yeah.
So I'll, include a little bit of information in the introduction that kind of goes over what tabletop role-playing games are and the rudimentary history. But why don't you tell us what will make The Hooded Man kind of unique as a game?
Okay, good question. There are plenty of RPGs out there that are purportedly medieval.
Yes,
They're
much more
usually
so than Stone Age games.
they're usually that lean to some degree or another close to fantasy and the works of Tolkien and so on. When you actually look at the number of RPGs that actually don't feature those elements, it becomes very, very thin indeed. So, and what I wanted to do with this one, and what I wanted to do for a long time with a role play game, is explore a more realistic medieval setting.
Mm.
And that's not to say this game is slavishly realistic to the point of being, tediously so. It's still an adventure game. It's still a fun game, and it's still a fantasy in the sense that it's about Robin Hood or about being outlaws more broadly. It's an adventure game. You're playing peasants, medieval villains, however you pronounce that.
Right.
And I can't work that out. but yeah, so from the start, you are trying to survive, and you're in a very, very vulnerable position because you're a medieval peasant, and everyone's against you, and you're facing a tyrant in the form of the sheriff, who's vastly more powerful than you. So
Mm.
you're very much playing with relying on your wits, both as a player and as your character. And I think more broadly for me, I've always loved the idea of a game that pits characters, like a story really, as well, any sort of novel or film. I think there's something really appealing about putting characters in highly vulnerable situations against something that they can almost not prevail against.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
um, and that's very much this game. You can prevail, but for every small victory, there will be some thing that there's some recompense somewhere down the line for that.
So, what elements of the system for this game will help reinforce those ideas? If you know anything about tabletop role-playing games, you know Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah,
and in
yeah,
those you play basically fantasy superheroes
yeah,
where you get increasingly powerful to the point that you stride the land like gods once you get
yeah.
high enough level. So, in a game that is trying to get at this idea of you have powerful forces arrayed against you and survival is difficult, what do you have mechanically that helps enforce those kind of ideas?
So right from the outset, you are a weak character. In terms of the game mechanics, you don't start out with many advantages. Characters in the game are represented by traits, and initially you can start with as few as 3 traits. Now, what that means mechanically in the game is that for some things you're rolling just 3 dice to try and get a roll of 6 on one of those dice.
And those are all going to be 6-sided dice, right?
Yes, sorry, yes. 6.
Yeah.
And that's quite from an odds point of view, that's quite difficult. There are ways to get additional dice, which I can go on to, but essentially what that means is things start out difficult for you mechanically. Your characters start out. Why are they outlaws from the outset? Well, they've been accused of a crime, and the player can make the decision when they're creating the character whether that's actually true and they did commit the crime, or they've just been falsely accused.
Right.
And the sort of crimes can be petty in our eyes, but certainly were serious in medieval period. But they're medieval appropriate crimes. So to give you some examples, we have things like adulterating bread, which was a serious crime. If you're in the 13th century and you were found to be putting sawdust in your bread, that was frowned upon. But it could be also things like, what do I have? Felling a tree in the king's forest.
Yeah.
Again, another serious one. But then there are more serious ones like robbery you could be accused of and so on. So yeah, there are medieval appropriate crimes. So from a setting point of view, you start out as a possibly wrongly accused peasant. So you're not a knight. You haven't got fine weapons. You haven't got fine armor. You've got nothing like that to rely on. But the thing that you do have to assist you, other than the other player characters, of course, is that every character starts with a companion. What I wanted to do was capture that idea, which is in the Robin Hood legends and features obviously in a lot of the films and the TV, is that the idea of acting as a group, and there's the merry men, all the group working together, and that's the way that they really prevail. And so in the setting, you've got the player characters are working together, but there are also companions that you can use as players can use to assist them for roles in the game and that sort of thing, but also get them to do particular tasks. And what that means is what's potentially difficult can become slightly easier. So from a mechanical and setting point of view, it's congruent with the setting, but makes things a little easier for characters as well. So,
right. So it sounds like it's encouraging survival through cleverness and teamwork.
Yeah, essentially, which I think that's the spirit of, for me, when I think about Robin Hood and the Merry Men. That's one of the key things, the key themes that keeps reoccurring in the legend, isn't it? It's the idea of people acting together.
Yeah, yes. Banding together, working together for common purpose. We've had some medieval scholars on the podcast to talk about that theme in early Robin Hood poems, songs, and plays. That's a really interesting theme to kind of draw on and attempt to reinforce there through gameplay.
Well, one of the first ballads, if it might be the first ballad, is the story of Robin Hood having a disagreement with Little John. And the moment he separates from Little John, of course, what happens is he gets trapped by the sheriff, and he has to fight his way out of a church, I think, in the first ballad. So, and that's basically what happens when you don't work as a team. Well, you get into all sorts of trouble. So it very much reinforces that idea, doesn't it?
So why Robin Hood for you? What brought you to Robin Hood? What made you want to make a game that explored these ideas?
Well, two things really. The first is nostalgia. It was part of my childhood, and especially Robin of Sherwood, which because prior to that I'd seen some of the Robin Hood films, the old Errol Flynn movie, and a few others, which for their time, were good, enjoyable romps. They're good adventure tales, but I didn't really make much of an impression on me until we get to Robin of Sherwood series, and that was as a young man, that was my first exposure to the idea that there was something else in the legend of Robin Hood, because they emphasise very much a sort of pagan aspects. There's a surprising amount of occult references in Robin Sherwood, and as a young man, that was kind of like, wow, look at this. This is actually quite dark. He was a dark character. He wasn't just this romping adventuring sort. He was actually a bit darker than that. So that sort of so there's nostalgia for that, and since then it was always, well, how can I capture that? And I never really knew where to start with it. But then the other thing I think really was when I started to read a little more on the real life outlaws, the stories of the Cottrells and the Bolvilles, which are the 14th century, early 1300s, I think, that they were active in the sort of Midlands, North Midlands area of England. The accounts of those gangs, actual gangs, which could have well been the inspiration for the Robin Hood tales, possibly, that drew my interest in, and I thought, well, it's about time I did something or tried my hand at doing something around Robin Hood, because I'd seen it done before in role-playing games, and for me, none of the games or the settings that I'd read previously really captured what I wanted to explore in the whole Robin Hood thing. And that was the idea that you were intrinsically vulnerable people. You were just normal, everyday folks facing this great adversary.
Right, yeah, and I don't want to, just badmouth some of the other Robin Hood role-playing games out there. I think some of them can be quite fun, but I think most of them are leaning on the more Errol Flynn side, swashbuckling tales, and that's more what they're trying to emulate as sort of cinematic adventure, where it sounds like your primary influences are the medieval ballads, the medieval history of outlaws, and Robin of Sherwood. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely it would, yeah. And there's nothing in and of themselves, from what I've seen of the other role-playing games. They do what they do well, and they're well researched on the whole. But there's that, I think for a lot of designers, that there's that feeling that they've still got to think about the knights in armor, and all of the trappings of the medieval that we see in a lot of medieval games. Quite rightly, a lot of them focus on knights, and because the knights are exciting. The knights are the people with the power, the knights are the people with the cool weapons and the armor. Why wouldn't you want to play a game where you can go around with armor and big swords? But for me, none of that was really saying, well, this is what Robin Hood did. And I like games that focus on normal people trying to be better than themselves.
Right. Oh, I think that leads quite well into my next question, which, so we talked about your sort of influences on the Robin Hood side. What are some of your influences on the role-playing game side and role-playing design side?
Well, a big influence for me was basic role-playing, which is Chaosium's house engine for role-playing games. That's a percentile-based game. So in that game, you're rolling 10-sided dice to generate a percentage to get equal to or less than a specific number. And when I was introduced to RuneQuest back in the 80s, when I'd first started role playing, because I'd started with, like everyone, with D&D, and I was introduced to RuneQuest, and it was a revelation for me, because this was a game where it was more simulationist, it felt more realistic, and it felt more deadly. And so in D&D, as enjoyable as it is, there is a point in D&D, for me anyway, where you get a character that doesn't feel vulnerable anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no challenges left. With the basic role-playing system, in whatever iteration, so in RuneQuest or in Call of Cthulhu,
Right.
you are a vulnerable character. No matter how competent that character becomes, something can always go wrong for them, and they can always be faced with that threat of death, or in the case of Call of Cthulhu, madness, insanity. So that system is a bigger inspiration, and specifically going on from that, Call of Cthulhu, the idea, and that's, I suppose, where my love of the downtrodden, weak, vulnerable character trying to work against the odds. It's where that comes from, I think. The Call of Cthulhu.
Right. As soon as you mentioned that the first time, my mind immediately went to Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah. Well, and there you are, and essentially, what have you got? You've got a character trying to battle against some unknowable dark gods and forces,
unimaginably powerful.
Yeah, beyond your conception, and that's ultimately doomed to fail. Now, in the Hooded Man, you're not ultimately doomed to fail, and you could prevail, and you will eventually get stronger. And when you reach the heights of Robin Hood, you're a very competent character. But to get there is a tough journey, and that's what I wanted to represent. So games like Call of Cthulhu are a big inspiration. And then more recently, I don't know how many Free League games you're aware of or been exposed to, but
I mean, I'm actually aware of a fair few, but probably most listeners will not be.
Okay, so Free League produced they one of their early games was a game called Mutant Year Zero, and that was my first introduction into a set of mechanics which were a big inspiration for me. I didn't actually. A lot of people have looked at my mechanics for my previous game, Paleomythic, and assumed that I took a lot of my inspiration from the Year Zero mechanics. I actually conceived of those before I read the Free League mechanics, but then when I read the Free League mechanics, there were so many other cool ideas that they'd used in that. I thought, yeah, okay, I need to re-examine what I'm doing here. So Free League games, Mutant Year Zero, Forbidden Lands is a big favourite of mine, and that's a great survival fantasy game. So that's a big inspiration as well. But then there's like they do a folklore game, Versen, which
is a beautiful game. I've been trying to convince. So listeners to the podcast who listen to any of the Splitting Arrow episodes will know Rick, who always joins me for those.
Yeah.
I gave him a full set of those books, and I've been trying to convince him to run it for years, and he really wants it. It's a matter of finding the right group.
Yeah, and it's a fun game, and that's great from the folklore point of view, which again the Hooded Man doesn't overtly have any folklore reference in it to any great degree. There is an option to use sorcery in the game, but it is only an option. But if you think about the early Robin of Sherwood series, that again, I think that there's that link to that pagan, the old ways sort of idea, and I think that's probably an underlying inspiration for me, just more generally. But
the name certainly evokes that, the Hooded Man.
Yeah.
A phrase they used a lot in that show.
Yeah, well, and that's and obviously for me that my inspiration for the title obviously comes from the theme to Robin of Sherwood. As I say, I wouldn't want to give anyone the impression that I'm directly copying
Right.
Robin Sherwood.
It's
It
not
is.
Robin of Sherwood, the role-playing game.
No, it isn't. It isn't. And I think you'd be disappointed. You could certainly play it like that, and you could certainly recreate that with the Hooded Man. But it's different to that, and it's more than that. Because the other parts, the other aspects of the game are you can do the things that I would have always liked to have seen in Robin of Sherwood, but were never there. And that's things like the outlaw camp. They whenever you see them, they're just sitting around in the forest. Where I actually think, well, maybe they would have built themselves a camp with, with some shelters,
some rudimentary shelters at least.
Yeah, that would have, and lookout posts and things like this, and so on. And so I've gone down in the game. I've gone down that road as well. So, but yeah, so those are my two big, in terms of games. Those are my two big influences. There are, I mean, I have. I'm currently sitting in my cellar. And I have hundreds of role-playing games. I inadvertently started to collect them, and it wasn't my intention to become a collector, but I just became interested in a new game would come out, and I think, oh, I wonder how that would work, and so on. So, and it's expanded to the point now where I can't fit everything. So there we are.
Very, very easy to do. I had to pare down my collection significantly when I moved overseas.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm getting to that stage. I think, sadly, I'm going to have to let some of them go. I think there we are.
Yeah, well, but there's still room for one or two more.
I'm sure.
There might be, a certain Robin Hood game on the shelf for long.
Absolutely. Come December, that will be the case. Yes. I'll have an actual physical copy rather than just the PDFs that I've got at the moment.
I love physical copies, like, just so much. It's so much easier for me to run a game from a real book.
Well, yeah, and that's what I do normally. I've once in a while I'll run from my laptop, but generally now I prefer physical, old school paper, dice, book. That'll suit me.
The tactile elements.
Yeah,
it's great. And nothing wrong with running a game online with people. I run a game with people who are over in the US. It's the only way I can play a game with them. And I know lots of people in similar situations. If it's the only way you can get a game, meet up with your friends. If it has to be digital, that's what it is. But if it can be in person, I prefer that too.
Yeah, needs must, isn't it? A lot of the times, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we mentioned briefly in our emails the idea of kind of going through the character creation process for Hooded Man.
Absolutely, yeah. I can do that. I have my PDF ready to go. So
I would love to do that.
Okay.
Do I need any dice or anything for the character creation for Hooded Man?
You need a few. You could probably get away with 3 D6.
All right. Let me grab 3d6.
Okay. Although that being said, and it's something I've done with all the games that I've designed, and that is I always give players the option to choose or random or a combination of both. It doesn't matter. So.
All right. I have 3 6-sided dice.
Okay. Grand. All right. So to give you an idea of how the character will end up. So characters in this game are they're represented as a description. So like you'd read in a book, rather than so there are no numerical values that in normal role-playing games you'd normally have attributes, characteristics, whatever you want to call them, but then they'd normally have numerical values, and you might have skills, and again they'd have numerical scores. In this, that isn't the case. So your character could end up something like, so let's have a look. John of Northwick is a rugged, surly bowyer seeking revenge and accused of poaching. He is resilient, strong, and willful. That's the character.
All right.
Equipment and whatever, but that's fundamentally what you get. So
short and sweet, but something to start with.
Yeah, and obviously you can develop those. Each of those things is really a key to you developing more, either as you create the character or as you play. And I'm a great fan of a backstory being created through the game.
Yeah.
So as events happen, you can rationalize them by saying, well, yeah, that's because my character in the past did whatever. So, because then I think that works really well. But yeah, okay. So I digress. So we start with a name. So you can choose a name, so an appropriately medieval name. But I do have a random table if you want to roll.
Oh yeah, let's do the random table since you have one.
Okay. So 3d6 then.
Okay, and I'm gonna roll them on the tabletop so the microphone picks it up so they can hear
Okey-doke.
really rolling dice. All right, that is a 13.
So 13. So if you're a male character, you're Nicholas. If you're a female character, you're Catherine.
All right, I tend to stick with characters that match my gender, so I'll stick with Nicholas.
Okie dokie. So the next thing is characters have a last name, a by name, which medieval characters sometimes didn't have, obviously, depending on what century you're talking about. And here we're talking about around the 13th century. So you might have just been called Nicholas.
Right.
But
Nicholas of Wickham or wherever.
Yeah, you're well, and there. So you can have a by name, which could be something like Nicholas of wherever you come from, or it could be Nicholas the farmer, Nicholas the carter. So let's have a 3d6 roll and see what your by name would be.
All right. That is a 9.
So a 9, well, strangely enough. So you could be Nicholas the farmer or Nicholas Farmer, or from a village called Hansted. So you could be Nicholas of Hansted or Nicholas Hansted.
Let's go with Nicholas the farmer. Let's embrace being a man of the soil here.
And so following that, we have what we need to do now is generate an adjective that hints at what your appearance and your demeanor would be. So we just have one word for each one of those, which you can then develop if you want to, but it gives you something to start from, basically. So a 3d6 roll for your appearance.
Okay. Now this is randomly generating basically this character and his starting traits, but one could also just make them up themselves, right?
Yeah, you could these, yeah. There are some actual fixed traits which you can't deviate from because they're part of the mechanics. But these, appearance and demeanor, yeah, you could choose whatever you want.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of flexibility there.
Yeah. Sure.
If you've got something in mind, you could play it.
Absolutely.
But if you enjoy the random element of the role, you could do that too.
If you wanted to
and
be,
I like that element a lot.
Nicholas the farmer, who's 7 feet tall, then that's fine. Appearance if you want.
All right, I got a 12.
A 12 means, well, there we go. You're short, or so you're
not 7 foot tall.
So Nicholas the farmer is a short, and now for demeanor, another 3d6 roll.
Okay. That is a 14.
A 14, serious. So you're a maybe a gloomy looking character, or you don't smile very often, Nicholas.
Yes, dour Nicholas.
There we are. And so next, this is so all characters are generally motivated by they're outlaws, they're fighting against the sheriff, they're fighting against tyranny, but beyond that you have a personal motivation as well. So that's another 3d6 roll.
Yes, and I am a huge fan, and this is something I have built into other games that I have played, like inserted it in, adding some kind of mechanic for a motivation. What is your character's motivation? Can it help drive them?
His motivation is he's seeking position. And by that, he wants to become a leader of some sort, or to gain status in some way.
Okay.
If these didn't suit the character, if you didn't feel they were congruent, obviously you can re-roll anything, you can choose anything. It's very flexible, really, in that sense.
So I could easily come up with a character on my own, but also one of the fun elements of the random rolls is it can drive you to play a character you wouldn't have thought of. And so now I'm thinking about this character named Nicholas. He's this farmer, short, serious, probably having a little bit of a complex, always feeling a little bit on the downtrodden side, wants to be taken seriously in his community, maybe has been eyeing a position for like the local bailiff or something.
Yeah, that's a pretty good angle. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And he's now being frustrated because suddenly, for some reason, we're going to find out next, he's become an outlaw.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, perhaps gets into a fight with somebody else when that position becomes available, or a fight with the current bailiff who he thinks is incompetent at his job, but the fight goes a little too far.
Yeah. Maybe so. But we can roll now for the crime he actually committed or he's been accused of. So
I see. We've got a random table for crimes as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
all right. So 3d6 again. Yes.
Again, if you wanted to choose something, of course you could. So yeah, 3d6. Yeah.
All right. So I've got a 9.
So a 9, that is quite appropriate. Disturbing the peace.
Disturbing the peace.
Yeah. So some sort of dispute, maybe drunkenness.
Yeah.
Maybe Nicholas, the farmer, had one too many beers and actually told it like it is.
And he's not a bad fellow, Nicholas, but he's an angry drunk.
There we go. An angry drunk that probably said a few things he should have kept to himself.
Right.
So there we go. So that's the first part of the description, and that is all just very descriptive. There are no real mechanics involved in that part of it. Now we do come to the mechanics, and that's where we choose our traits. As I said earlier, traits, these are the fundamental components of the mechanics. They govern how many dice you can roll for things and what you get bonuses for. So the way it works is you're going to start with 3 traits with an option to have 4 traits, which I'll go on to. So every character starts with 3. What that means is, for most actions, for most tests, you're just rolling 3 dice, which isn't a lot. But if you perform an action where one of those traits is relevant, you get a bonus dice. So, for example, if you have the trait charismatic and you're making a test to persuade someone, you would get a bonus dice. So instead of 3 dice that you normally roll, you get 4 dice.
And you need to get a 6 for it to count.
And you need to get a 6 for a success.
Yeah. So I think of the 4 times that I just rolled 3d6. Of those 4 rolls, there was a 6 one time.
Yeah. So that's it. So, well, that's the thing with on 3d6. I think it's roughly. I have got the percentages written down, the percentage chances, and it's roughly around a 30% chance, which isn't a lot. So you do start off pretty poorly competent, but then you should only really be rolling a test when you're really being challenged. I mean, for most actions, if you think about our everyday lives, we're not challenged, we're not pushed to our limits that often. We don't do anything that really challenges us day to day. So, and that's my view of tests, is they should only really come into play when you're really trying to do something above and beyond what would normally be you'd normally be capable of doing. So, yeah. So,
yeah, I've always had a similar philosophy. Like, the chance of failure needs to be real and it needs to matter if you're going to ask people to roll dice. There was one time I was playing in a Star Wars role-playing game, and I was a pilot who worked for the Jedi Council. So that was the one thing my character was supposed to be really, really good at.
Yeah.
And all we're doing is like lifting off from the planet Coruscant. No, we're not being chased. There's not inclement weather or anything. But the storyteller just really wanted us to roll dice for everything.
Yeah.
Like, okay, make your piloting roll to blast off from the launch pad. I rolled a critical failure.
Great.
Doing my normal job.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, yeah, yeah. And I suppose I do love randomness, and I think there's a lot to be said for games where there is those random elements that happen and suddenly the most mundane thing goes catastrophic. However, that shouldn't happen that shouldn't be the norm, should it? So and so we really shouldn't be testing ourselves that much that often. So yeah. But as I say,
but like the chance of failure needs to be real there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was the thing too, was like,
yeah.
oh well, the game can't happen if we don't actually fly the spaceship into space. So he just hand waved it away. It's like, the takeoff's a little bumpy.
Yeah. yeah. So there you go. And that's an example, GM, think of your consequences first. Yeah, so there we are. So we start with 3 traits. There's an option to get an additional one. But you should also keep in mind as well, you're going to get a companion, and a companion can help you an awful lot with what you're doing. So for traits, then, there are a total of 18. And what I wanted to do in this game was create a lot of nuance so that you could, so it'd be very difficult to have 2 characters that were precisely the same. If you want to keep it random still, then you're first rolling a D3.
Okay.
To determine what table we're using, and then it'll be a D6 on that particular table.
All right. So for my D3, I've got a 1.
So that's the first table. So then a D6 on that table.
A 2.
So your first trait is agile.
Okay. Handy. That sounds useful.
Yeah. And in this game, it is useful. Yes, it means you'll have a slightly better chance of dodging the sword blows and the spear thrusts and the arrows and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's good. So yeah, and again then for your second trait.
Same process.
Yeah. D3 and then a D6.
Okay. A 1 again.
Okay.
And then a 6.
Creative.
Okay.
So creative is essentially you're imaginative and artistic, so you can apply yourself to all creative talents like drawing and wood carving, cooking, brewing ale if you're so inclined. But it also applies to conceiving new things as well. So if you want to come up with a plan that's really, it's more the sort of out there things, that sort of wild, bizarre plan.
If you want to devise a cunning plan.
Don't worry, Mr. B. I have a cunning plan to solve the problem.
That's the trait that will do that. So there you go. So you're agile and creative so far, and then for the last of these 3 traits, the same process, D3 and D6.
Okay. So a 2 for my D3, and then a 6 again.
And quick is your final one. So you're good reactions, you're fast, good at running, you got the speed to be able to catch the pot before it drops off the table and smashes. You can climb the ladder before it's pushed away from the castle wall, that sort of thing. So where agile is your suppleness and your balance, quick is your out and out speed. But yeah, I can picture Nicholas the farmer as a real lithe, sort of lissom,
yes,
maybe a bit on the scrawny side. Maybe he's a bit of a creative as well. He's quite artistic. Yeah. So that's some
wants to be taken seriously, which he feels is a little bit of a challenge as being this slight and rather short man of very common stock.
So there we go.
Can really contribute a lot with his agile wits and agile actions.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But not a power hitter.
No, maybe not. However, we can, and we'll see whether you're a gambling man. So you can have an extra trait if you want, but if you do, you must take a hindrance.
Oh, I mean, I love a hindrance. Hindrance is just that character. I mean, to a point. You don't want too many of them, but a good hindrance or two, absolutely.
So if you want an extra trait, then roll as the same process before, D3 and a D6, and we'll find your extra trait that you get in recompense for your hindrance.
Okay. So I've got table 3 this time.
Yeah.
And 6 again.
So you're wise.
Yes. See, I knew that he was a smarty.
Yeah, there you go. So you have got some experience behind you. You've got a good memory. They come to you when you're sorting out the puzzle, trying to gather the detailed information or comprehend something. So that is quite an interesting character. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. To pay for that, you've got to roll 2d6 now.
Okay. All right. I have some. I've been rolling these green dice for my character, building them up, and I'll roll some red Eye of Sauron dice here for my. I like to be thematic. I got an 8.
An 8. So you're memorable. Which you might think is a good thing.
Not so much when you're on the run.
not when you're an outlaw. No, indeed. So you have something distinctive about your appearance. Maybe that's a facial scar, unusual eyes, broken nose, a wild hair, a very long beard, or something of your choosing. What that means is now during the game you might be forced to make a notoriety test. You imagine the scene. You're walking the streets of Nottingham, and there's some guards walking the other way. You need to then make a notoriety test, and if you fail that test, they recognise you.
Yeah, well, good thing I'm quick.
Well, then you've got to run, fight, or try and charm your way out, or whatever it is. But yes, so there you go.
Wonderful.
So far we've been calling him Nicholas the Farmer, but the next thing is we determine the talent he has, and this might change the whole thing in terms of it doesn't need to. If you want to still think of him as a farmer, then that's fine. But what a talent is essentially it's written as almost as an occupation, but it doesn't tie you to that occupation. Certainly not now anyway, because you're effectively an outlaw. So, but yeah, so talent, you get 1, and it's an 11 to 66 roll, a D66 as some people call it. So that's where you roll in 2 6-sided dice. One is a tens, and the other is the units. So it's simulating a percentile roll, but with 6-sided dice.
Oh, just with 6-sided dice. Okay.
So,
all right. So I will have a 64 then.
A 64. So your talent is a wayfarer.
Wayfarer.
That means, so you're a wanderer. You roam the land in search of work, food, and shelter. It's not through choice a lot of the times, and it might be through circumstance. Maybe something happened in your village that forced you out. Maybe you were a farmer, but circumstances meant that you couldn't be anymore, and you started being a wayfarer, and maybe that's the point where you became an outlaw as well. A wayfarer gives you the ability to endure a lack of rest. You don't suffer penalties for missing a night's sleep. It also means you can make the best of food supplies. So when everyone else is running out of their food, the wayfarer still can make their food last longer, make their water.
Knows how to ration themselves.
Yeah, essentially. A handy talent to have, especially when you're on the run.
Yeah. What would a penalty look like in a situation where me and the other players have been on the run for a while? We didn't get any sleep. We get cornered by some guards. I'm a wayfarer, so I'm not as fatigued as they are. Yeah. What sort of penalty are they suffering?
So normally you're okay if you go 1 or maybe 2 nights, you don't struggle too much. However, if you start injured and you don't get any rest, you don't heal. So normally you would heal 1 wound per night's rest. A wayfarer will still be able to heal, basically, won't suffer any disadvantage there. A normal character, they just won't heal.
And so it's not necessarily that there's a penalty to the dice rolls, it's that I can recover from injury.
Yeah. And that might seem like a minor thing. However, in this game, when you're injured, you temporarily lose your traits. So given that you're a character with 4 traits, if you take a wound, you're down to 3 traits, and then 2, and then 1, and then you're defeated, basically. Not necessarily dead, but you're in a grim way. So your abilities decline very rapidly indeed, and taking a wound is incredibly significant in this game. It can really disadvantage you. So not being able to heal quickly is a big disadvantage. So if you're woken up in the night continually, roused by whatever wild animals or people attacking or whatever, you're going to struggle after a few nights. But the wayfarer won't. The wayfarer can always recuperate. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. And is it random, or do you pick which trait you lose with each injury?
You can pick, yeah. And what I encourage people to do is to rationalise what that looks like physically. So, for example, if you
it becomes very descriptive that way. I quite like it.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the beauties of using a system that affects traits is that, so if you decide, oh, I've taken a wound, I will lose my quick. What does that look like? Well, maybe that's a leg wound. If you got a leg wound, you can't run as fast anymore. Yep. You've been distracted by the pain of the leg wound, so you're just not quick. Your reactions have gone. Why you might think it's difficult to rationalise, but so let's say you lose your wise trait. What does that mean? You've taken a blow to the head. You're a bit befuddled. You can't think so clearly, and so it encourages people to really think about the way injuries are affecting them, which is good sort of.
I love that, and like I said, I think that's very descriptive. I can only think of 1 or 2 other systems where I've seen that done before, but I really quite like it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. It appealed to me because I wanted to create something that really showed the real, without being slavishly realistic, showing the real effects of being injured. It really can impair you. So it really is important to try and avoid combat and try and avoid getting hurt, as it is in life. So yeah.
Other than like maybe some equipment, did we basically make Nicholas the Wayfarer there? Because I think he is going to start going by that identity, maybe.
Yeah.
Because the farmer lifestyle did not really suit this short, agile, creatively minded man. He's not happy he's an outlaw, but he doesn't really miss being a farmer.
No, he was clearly born to the wrong life, wasn't he? So yeah, there we go. But yeah, that's it. The last bit would be sorting some equipment, and then of course, what normally as a player in the game you'd do is then you'd go through a very similar process to create your companion. And your companion is virtually the same as a character, except they don't have a talent. They just have the traits. But what that means then is, so at the end of all that process, you get a character where if you're facing a test, you can potentially put 7 dice, 6 or 7 dice, because you've got a companion helping you as well. As long as you can rationalise why the companion would also be attempting whatever it is you're attempting, it means you get that second chance, basically.
Nice.
So it's not quite as grim as it first appears.
Not as long as you got a buddy.
There you go.
Robin Hood and Little John walking through the forest.
There you go.
Yeah, and that was really quite quick, in just a very short period of time, just a few minutes, we really were able to make character and start to have a sense of who the character is. And, I've been writing all of the things down, and there's no numbers here. It's quite fun to see a mostly formed role-playing game character here who isn't just a collection of numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And although I suppose some people might think it's very prescriptive, but what I've actually done is I've written a specific format that you can write your character in, so that once you've determined all those, it then becomes 2 sentences to describe the fundamentals of the character. So it's a name, is a appearance, demeanor, hindrance, talent, seeking, motivation, and accused of crime. That's the first sentence. But and as I say, I guess that's quite prescriptive, but it means you've got that standard format that if you were reading a book, that would be a character description, and that's what I wanted to get to, and it's what I did in my previous game. It was this idea that characters should feel more like they're out of fiction or real life and not out of statistics.
Right.
For me, because I think that pulls me away of the immersion in role-playing games.
Yeah. No, I love the idea that it's leaning towards immersion. I love that you have a sort of vision with the sense of, well, I'm trying to go for this sort of life's tough approach to being a medieval outlaw. So if somebody were to pick up a copy of The Hooded Man, obviously it would include all these rules to make the characters, make the companions, include additional rules like we were just kind of getting at with the rules for injuries and things like that. What else would one expect to find in the Hooded Man role-playing book?
Well, okay, so it's not really a combat game, but there are some detailed aspects to combat without it being difficult to combat is easy, like the whole game is easy to play and run, but there are some nuances in combat that again I think make it more narrative. I encourage something I call ruses, and that's basically tricks and whatever that characters can do in the game to give themselves advantages, and that's really to emulate the sort of movies and TV where you see the characters and they're not just fighting their foes with swords, they're doing things like throwing tapestries over the heads of villains, or throwing things in front of them so they'll trip over and fall. And those are the things I suggest in the game. So there's mechanics for those. And then there's also mechanics for specific weapons. So depending on what you're armed with, you can do certain little tricks. And here I'm thinking of things like in the Robin Hood films and series, you get the bow shot, the fancy bow shot that splits arrows,
Right.
and things like that, or the bow shot that severs a rope and causes something to fall. You can do those with the bow. If you're using a sling, you can do a fancy little trick which I think is in, I think there's a scene that Much, the miller's son, does in Robin of Sherwood, where he uses a sling and shoots it, and it bounces off a frying pan or something, and rebounds and hits the foe. And I wanted to use that, something like that. So with a sling, you can do a rebound shot where you bounce it off a wall or something like that. So you can defeat cover. So if you've got a foe, he's hiding behind a wall, that's okay. I've got a sling, I'll do a trick shot, bang, we can do that. So those sorts of little things in the combat system. But I also include, there is potential for you to get a band together to form a small army. Because at some point the sheriff is going to pay some money and get some mercenaries and try and get you out of the forest. So you need some extra support. So there's a system in there for where you can fight a battle, a mass battle.
Right.
And it's abstracted, but they are in there. So you can get a company of 50, 100 people to fight your knights and your mercenaries and that sort of thing. And within those battles, you could have personal combats. So in the midst of battle, you're standing there and someone singles you out and you can have a personal fight within that. So the rules for that sort of thing. But the other thing which I mentioned earlier was I'm really keen to have the outlaws establish a camp where they can do things like put traps in, like pit traps, if they're discovered. They can build shelters. They can have lookout points, which means it makes it easier for them to spot when foes are creeping up on them. They can have a place where they can do carpentry, pottery, smithing, and most importantly, brew ale.
Friar Tuck certainly agrees that is the most important.
And to go along with that, you can grow food. There is a system for if you really want to explore your farming roots, you can plant some seeds and grow them, and they become food, and that will help feed the company as you progress. And then, of course, then there's some optional rules for sorcery. For those people who watch the Robin of Sherwood series and go, God, I really want to do that scene where the Baron de Belem is using his sorcery against Robin, you can do that. And there are some sorcery rules where you can be a player character sorcerer, or you can just be facing foes that have those sorts of talents, which you've got to. And there was the other great episode is where they're facing the witches that were the servants of the Baron de Belem, and they beguiled Robin. So you can do that in the game as well if you want to. So there's those, and then of course there's a lot of background. There's rules for creating different sorts of foes that have. And one of the things I wanted to do with foes was make sure that they were truly despicable. So you can be facing foes where, to counter your attacks, they will do things like drag an innocent bystander in front of your blow. So they take the blow rather than the villain, because they're villains and they act dastardly.
Kind of dastardly feats for the villain. Yeah. Oh no!
Or you can think, aha, I've got you cornered now, villain. They go, well, yeah, you can say that, but what about these 6 crossbowmen that would suddenly appear? And there are things like that. So
that's fun, yeah. So you mentioned the idea of like really building up this camp to the point that you could be creating shelters, you could be growing food. Is there a notion that the game is expected to take months or years in game time, not in real world time, only if you are committed and have a steady group, but in game time, that it could take several years for the story to progress?
My aspiration is that's the way it will work. Yeah, so you can play over you can work it so that you're playing maybe a monthly adventure. In game times, there is or a couple of adventures in a month, and then the rest of the time, what the characters doing? Well, they're devoting their time and energies to building up the camp, getting resources, because obviously outlaws have to feed themselves. and you can choose to do that by robbing the poor, the rich to feed the poor, not the other way around. But you can also do things like growing and whatever to look after yourselves, or forage, or hunt. So yeah, there is an expectation that the characters will do that, and they will look to increase the size of their outlaw company. One of the other things you can do in the game is that there's rules for generating settlements, villages, and so on, and you can ally villages to your cause, which gives you a bonus then, in that you can a particular settlement will have a certain specialty, like they're very good at supplying ale, or they're very good at supplying timber, firewood, and so on, or they're very good at hiding you if you need to escape, and those sorts of things. So yeah, so there's that expectation that the game will carry on over months and years, and in that time you can be traveling the region, allying villages, ensuring your survival, building up your camp, and doing all those other things. So it's not just about going out robbing and fighting the sheriffsmen, as fun as that is.
And so, is there anything else in the book to kind of help a GM and players get started with their own campaign?
There's the standard things you get. I mean, in most role-playing games, there's the standard guides and so on. But beyond that, I'm very much invested in the idea that a role-playing game should be a toolbox, and should just equip the games master with all the tools they need to create their world. So rather than just describe everything, what I do is present the mechanics so you can create it. So as you're reading through and you're getting a sense of what the game's about, you can then go, oh, okay, so I will create this settlement. I will create this site. So you can have a rural location and generate its name, which gives you an idea of what it's. So you could have a site that's an ancient hill that was previously the site of a battle, or that's suggested to have been an old something to do with the fairies, or that sort of thing. It's got some folklore connections or something. So there are those systems to guide GMs through the whole process of creating their own world. And then, of course, again, like many role-playing games, there's the I describe how to create adventures, but then I go on from that and add actual seeds for adventures.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the book, of course, there are 3 actual adventures pre-written. So
okay, yeah.
So you start out with 3. Yes.
Some guides, some seeds, some adventures that you can get started with there.
Yeah.
You know, and in my experience, after doing this for a long time myself, it really, like, every GM is so different in terms of what they need, what they want. My style is very much of, like, I do find like that little seed to kind of get you going helpful, but then I have, gotten campaign books and started through that campaign, and then, like, by the time we've gotten like 2 sessions in, nothing in the campaign book matters anymore because we've really gone off in our own directions.
Absolutely, and maybe I have a short attention span. I don't know, but I've often found that big, bulky campaign books and settings, I can read through those. I can commit in job or read, and then 20 pages in, I'm thinking, oh, I can't remember what I read 5 pages ago. so maybe it's age, but and that's why what I wanted to do was put some tools in place. So it's and I'm a big fan of suggesting setting without being explicit. So in a description, I will suggest something, but I won't explicitly give you all of the details. What I will then do is say, I know you can create those details, it just works better for me, because I like to, and I write role-playing games from the point of view of what would I like to play. So, and that's the way I think. Yeah,
makes sense to me.
Yeah. So that's my approach really. It's like I would rather give you the tools to be the GM than just tell you what you should do, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, makes sense to me. So when will the PDF of the Hooded Man be available?
That will be around the time the physical copy is available, which will be December of this year, 2025. So yeah, I imagine there'll be a simultaneous release, maybe a little beforehand, but that's very much in the hands of Osprey rather than me. So,
and that will be the best place to look for the game is through the Osprey website.
Well, you can certainly find it on the Osprey website. The game is already listed as for pre-order on other sites, Amazon, and some of the sites that sell games and Waterstones and such like.
Great. Well, I'll make sure to include a link to its landing page on Osprey's site in the episode description.
Thank you.
And hopefully by this time next year, there will be so many campaigns of the Hooded Man running. There will be imaginary outlaws everywhere.
I hope so. Yes. That would be grand.
Thank you for taking some time in your evening to join me, Graham.
That was an absolute pleasure.
Yes, I enjoyed it a lot. And maybe someday I'll bring Nicholas the Wayfarer to a tabletop and give him some proper adventures and roll up his companion and all of that.
Please let me know how he fares when you do. That would be grand.
I sure will. Have a great night.
Thank you.
And good luck with the book's release.
Thank you. Cheers, Thaddeus.
My thanks again to Graham Rose for joining me in the Greenwood to discuss The Hooded Man, which is slated for release on December 18th, 2025, from Osprey Publishing. As it happens, Graham is not the first writer of a Robin Hood role-playing game I've had the fortune of meeting. Years ago, long before I started this podcast, I met Bryce Whittaker at a convention, and I purchased his game, Hood, Swashbuckling Adventures in Sherwood. Last year, I started an online campaign using that game. Joining me now are two of the players from that campaign, Ben Curley and Theo Papke, to discuss that particular system and how well it's been providing those swashbuckling adventures.
Thank you for joining me here. We're just going to discuss for a few minutes your general thoughts about the game Hood, Swashbuckling Adventures in Sherwood, which is a game that I have been running for the two of you plus two others for how long has it been? It's been over a year, but our gameplay has been pretty sporadic. Maybe about 10 sessions or so is what we've managed to get in.
Yeah. Let me see what I have in my notes. Yeah, I have 11 sessions of notes.
So you've been playing the game for long enough to have a little bit of a feel for it. You're also people who have appeared multiple times as guests on the Splitting Arrows episodes. So I know that you have at least some familiarity with Robin Hood stories. How do you feel that the game Hood does in terms of feeling like bringing Robin Hood stories to a tabletop?
So right now, I almost feel like we're not quite like playing a Robin Hood, but we're in this very interesting historical setting where Robin Hood may or may not have existed in this early 13th century England. And it's fascinating to be role-playing in this very much more grounded setting where Robin Hood is still a mythic figure. We've not run into him or any merry men. We've been running ourselves into trouble.
Oh, have you not run into any merry men? Have you not?
Oh, geez, did we? Oh no.
I mean, does Sir Richard of the Lee count? I don't think he does.
No, not him. Yeah, so the campaign that I've been running, it's called Legacy of Sherwood, and it's meant to be a little bit, Robin Hood and the Merry Men, the next generation. So we have all of the players as outlaws, recent outlaws very specifically, and it's about them trying to kind of figure out their path and survive as outlaws in the early 13th century during the reign of King John, with Theo playing Barth the cheesemonger and Ben playing a former tax collector who is now on the run from the law.
I wish I
Yeah.
was a cheesemonger. That's where the money is. I'm the cheese maker.
Oh,
Where the
yes.
cows are.
Yes, that's right. You're farther down on the pole. But you're not getting to do any cheese making now either, because
No.
you've been having to survive in the forest.
Yeah, I love the wide breadth of options it gives you for professions, skills, personality, like vices and virtues. And certainly I would say a number of them are more practical for gameplay mechanics that you'll often into for dangerous situations than others. I have a lot that are not helpful, like being a cheesemaker and being superstitious.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that variety. Like I was going through like the list of professions, and I was like, oh, I'm so used to playing all these D&Ds where you're always a fighter or a wizard, or you're always capable. Let's try being someone less capable. Let's go with
Yeah.
Cheese Man.
This is a game that doesn't have classes like D&D, but you do pick a profession, and that does give you a kind of assumption that you have a set of skills that goes with that profession.
I will say, I feel like if we started a new game right now, I think I could build a character better. I think one thing we ran into is all of us were brand new, and I didn't know this is going to be more of a social game where it's going to be important that I know a lot about investigation and heraldry. And I'm like, no, I need to know how to shoot a bow at a guy. I keep getting wrecked. But what I do enjoy about the system is, well, you do have things like the virtues and vices and some of the skills that are, hey, here's a sheet you can pick from. What's been really cool for me is when we started getting into things like stunts, where it is just make a thing up, and now that is just a thing you can do, and that is a lot more freeing than the all right, I hit level 3, now I get my action surge as a D&D fighter. I get to, hey, this might be useful to have in this situation. I'm going to start a new stunt, and it balances itself because the first time you try a new stunt, it's very much a roll 2d4, and it's like, I hope I pull this off. I feel like a guy like at a pool party, like, I'm jumping off the roof. Like, hope I can make it. But then when you start leveling things up, that does start to feel cool. That said, I do feel like most of the Robin Hoodness of the system is coming from the fact that you are running the game. Hey, we happen to have a group full of Robin Hood nerds and the host of the best Robin Hood podcast on the internet.
Oh, no, the best because it's the only.
I mean, I didn't say it that way. I was trying to puff up your sales, but I haven't felt there is much to the system that is inherently Robin Hood.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not saying I have a problem with the system, or we can talk about mechanics more, but as it pertains to, does it feel Robin Hoody? Yes, because you're setting it in Sherwood Forest. We're running around the little hamlets around Nottingham. So you are bringing a lot of the Robin Hoody stuff. You could easily just take this whole system and say, and we are, in Bohemia in the 1400s.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that would suddenly start clanging.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that this there are aspects which do play more in favor of something Robin Hood or otherwise swashbuckly because of the pluck system that's in there. So one of the statistics you can have is pluck points that you can earn and spend on performing heroic actions. Help you do some extra swashbuckly work or taunt and confuddle your opponents. It's a little extra spice that this system has that really helps with the flavor of this is something that you see Errol Flynn in. This is this is the Adventures of Robin Hood. This is Captain Blood. Like I could totally see that being in like a fun swashbuckly pirate roleplay game as well. Like just it would totally fit right in. But it's not something that you could just throw into like D&D.
Yeah, and so the book has that pluck system. It also incorporates something called swashbuckling momentum that we haven't been using, mostly just because I just folded it into what we're calling pluck. It felt like it would have been confusing to have your swashbuckling momentum plus your pluck as these two separate things you're trying to track. So I just kind of folded them into one another. But that is very much the idea of that part of the system, is something that's giving you that swashbuckly feel. And to what Ben was saying, and what you were saying also, Theo, I think that this system, which is uses what's called a story pool, uses dice of different sizes, and you have your virtues, your vices, your skills, and how good you are is rated by how large your die type is. So if you have a D12 in something, you are amazing. If you have a D6, you're pretty average. And then you get to make a dice pool of all of these things together when you're doing your actions, your attributes, your vices, your virtues, and your stunts that Ben was mentioning. And I think that incorporation of the stunts and the pluck is part of what makes it feel very swashbuckly. But I think Ben's right that you could kind of take this general idea, pluck it into any sort of historical setting or modern day setting for that matter, that you just wanted to be not gritty and realistic, but have a little bit of actiony vibe, but also a little bit character driven. The one thing that I do think you couldn't do with it is do a D&D with it. I do feel it feels pretty distinctly different from D&D and lends itself better to this sort of Robin Hood game we've been running than just trying to retrofit D&D and force D&D into the Robin Hood swashbuckling box.
Oh yeah. I will feel sorry for D&D dice goblins because this has the like best but like dice goblin potential of any system I've played because of what you're talking about with the story pool. You're rolling like at a minimum 4-5 dice each time you're making a story pool roll to combine like your like a D10 and a D8 and a couple D4s and a D6, and you get to go jingle all your dice together in your hands and throw them out and be like, ah yes, success, 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 success. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Ben held up his like box full of dice that he happened to have on hand.
I am a dungeon master. I run D&D games. I had to go out and buy more dice to play this. So for those of you who are familiar with playing D&D, every roll is like casting Fireball. It is just a handful of dice, and that is fun, but it does slow down things before each roll because you have to select 10 different dice.
Yeah. So I pulled up a character sheet here, and there's a thing that I quite like in theory about this system where you're trying to perform some sort of action and you're describing how and why you're able to do this action based on the things that are on your sheet. But it means you start by picking a die for either a skill or your profession. So that could be things like archery, but it could also be history. It could be cheese making, it could be hunting, jumping, heraldry, any of those things. Then you pick either a physical trait or a personality trait. So that's like, I'm hardy, I'm strong, I'm quick, I'm determined. And so we're already at 2 dice there. Then you have to pick a virtue or a vice. Oh, I'm careful, I'm greedy, I'm resentful, I'm suspicious. Then you pick your stunt, or as Ben was saying, you make a new stunt. If it's not something you already have on your sheet, you're trying to do a new thing. And then optionally, you would include something like a piece of equipment. I'm going to pull back my trusty longbow. And that will also have its own die associated with it. So there's 2 dice for the stunt, 1 die for the equipment, 1 die for the virtue and vice, 1 for the trait, 1 for the skill or profession. And so we're already at like a minimum of 6. And for most of those, you had to give some kind of thought to it. You might have even needed to write down a new stunt on your sheet. So I think there is something very fun and very evocative about this idea of like, what of my virtues do impact my choice to attack this person, or all these sorts of things. But Ben's also right. It does mean it slows things down. It is not a game where the action feels brisk and moves at a fast clip, which for a game that's also trying to feel a little bit swashbuckly, it's even in the title, Hood, Swashbuckling Adventures in Sherwood. I do feel it doesn't be as actiony as one wants, even though it has these good actiony components to it.
Yeah, I like using all of these things, especially the non-combat parts of the game. So, like when we discovered, hey, we've got this trove of maps and some surcoats and what's going on, I was able to use some of my non-combat skills to be like, hey, I was walking around, I know heraldry, I was a tax collector. Hey, can I use that? Do I recognize any of these things on this map? And so saying, hey, here's all of these things about me, that means why I know it, felt a lot more fun and engaging than just roll a history roll. Hey, do you happen to know this? I
Mm-hmm.
just wish that the combat was a bit more streamlined, because a lot of the, like, if there was a distinction between combat and non-combat role story pool roles, it could really make the combat go a lot faster.
And that's even why halfway through our game, I've introduced another house rule where I kind of got rid of the armor protection levels because the combat was feeling really sluggish and taking a long time. If you're fighting a bunch of guards and you need to lower their armor protection rating every time you hit them. So yeah, definitely a game that has some really fun, interesting components to recommend it, but also isn't quite hitting the mark as well as one might hope in some ways.
And one way I do feel like we're playing, like, we've looked up a recipe online and we've changed up the ingredients.
Uh-huh. And there's nothing wrong with taking a game and changing it to suit your purposes. One I paid a lot of money for this game. It's mine now. I'm going to do what I want with it.
There's another aspect to it that I also really kind of like, and it's the implementation of the die steps.
Mm-hmm. I
Or
love a die step system.
Yeah, like our go-to system for other games is Savage Worlds. It's awesome. Where the better you are to skill, the higher number of faces on the die you roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, yeah, like I'm far better at some things than others. If you're crap at something or you're inexperienced, you're rolling a D4. If you're awesome, you're rolling a D8 or a D10.
Right. As opposed
And
to
then,
like D&D where you roll a D20 for everything and then add a modifier based on how good you are.
yeah, and then try to check it to some whatever target number you're trying to reach. I think this game treats 4s and higher as successes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is Savage Worlds is a similar thing. But also being able to apply the same values to across skills, traits, virtues in your stunts, and even the equipment. I like that being able to pipe to your equipment, where a dagger that's a D6 it's a regular dagger, but a D12 dagger, that thing is strong, it is sharp, that is a quality dagger that has like a monetary value to match.
Mm-hmm.
That's really neat. I like that. Like it just applying that quality to your list of items just drastically increases the inventory potential. Like
Mm-hmm.
in Savage Worlds or Dungeons and Dragons, like, oh yeah, you have
You have a
a
sword.
rope. You have a 50-foot rope.
But in this, you could have really big
Whereas,
rope.
and then like, yeah, you could
Get
use it for
rope that
whatever.
would get
You
rope
use,
that would get Sam Gamgee excited.
yeah, like you can have a D12 incredibly strong, sturdy, and resilient rope. That's the most valuable thing that you could possibly own.
Well, they do scale also with the type of thing.
Okay, yeah, I do
A
see. Never mind.
D12 rope is still going to be a lot cheaper than a D8 sword.
You're right. You're right. Yes, it is. I'm looking at that right now on the thing. but it also helps inform like how capable you are. Like if you have a good rope to do what task you're trying to do, it helps.
Mm-hmm. And
Having good equipment really helps.
And I like also that comes built in. It's only like I've only asked you guys to roll for it a few times because it's not come up a whole lot. But if you're using your equipment a lot, like overusing it, or you're using it for something it's not suited for, like trying to smack somebody over the head with your longbow, trying to use your sword to chop wood, then you roll its die type to see if you break it.
Mhm.
Oh,
And the poorer quality is, the more likely it is that it will break.
that's clever. That yeah, like that. I think that's an amazing aspect that they.
Yeah, I've asked you guys to make those
in.
rolls a couple times. Unfortunately,
Oh yeah,
nobody's broken their bow yet.
I absolutely love
I,
that.
I will say one thing where it is a your mileage may vary for people who might be considering trying this. One of the tricky things is when you make a story pool roll, the the game master does a opposing story pool roll, and so there isn't a thing like an armor class where it's, hey, if I hit a 19, I did it. It's, hey, last time I rolled, 3 successes and I hit the guard. This time I rolled 4 successes. Well, they
This
rolled
time he
better.
got out of the way.
Yeah, and so it does feel a bit more fluid. Hey, sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. That does feel more like natural, but it also means every time I roll, I've got no idea how well I did until the game master says, "Okay, you succeeded," which can be, frustrating. I rolled 4 successes. Yeah, they rolled 5, which I'm sure would be my character would feel like, "Hey, I just threw this beautiful chop with my axe, and he like limboed under it. What?"
We'll use the
Yeah,
system to do a Matrix game next.
yeah. Uh, since it is story pool versus story pool, there is never a I'm super confident that roll did it, or even a hey, I built a fighter, I get +8 to my attack rolls. I know I'm going to do this. I'm always good at this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guarantees are much less of a thing here in this
Yes.
game.
Yeah.
Which does, hey, if it's a swashbuckling adventure, there's usually a lot of slapstick, and we've gotten that in spades.
Yeah. We have had failures abound. Occasionally we play smart and know how to make things work a little bit better in our favor. Like it absolutely is to your benefit to say like gang up on an enemy. So like the first one of your team that attacks like an enemy guard, the enemy guard has like is on about this even footing where they need 4s and higher for their successes. And so that's where like, oh, that attack failed. But then if you have the second player come along and also attack them, because the guard's already acted against the first one, he'll need 5s or higher, right?
Yes, although I'm trying to remember if that's actually in the book or if that was another rule that I put in. I feel like that might be a thing that's just not covered in the book. There is a lot in this game book, but it in many ways feels like a first edition. I would be very curious to see a like cleaned up, revised version of this game that is taken a lot, after it's gotten a lot of playtesting, had a lot more thought put into what is actually working, and not now that people have been playing it out in the world. Because I do feel like there's just a few things that are missing from the rules. There's a few things that are elements, like I said, that I've kind of folded in, tried to make things move a little bit more smoothly, altered the recipe, as Theo was saying, but also a few things that are just kind of missing.
Oh yeah, like I'm actually looking through the book now, and it even says you don't have to worry about flanking, ganging up, elevation, or other combat advantages. Huh.
Yeah.
It just says, no, don't do that. All right, yeah. I I did not realize that as before I started going on about, oh yeah, if you play smart as well, you can give yourself an advantage. No, we changed that part of the recipe.
Yeah. But, as I said, that's what one does with the game.
Yeah.
There's also other things that we haven't been dealing with. There's something called the Sherwood turn, which is kind of how things are happening in the area on downtime with D10 rolls. You're getting hiring phases, but this is kind of assuming.
What's downtime?
Yeah. Well, we had a little bit at Richard's place.
Yeah.
But that's kind of assuming more that you are like a Robin Hood setup and you've got a band that you are running, as opposed to just being these 4 scrappy outlaws on the run.
Yeah. Barely any time to rest.
All right. Well, thanks so much for popping on to have a quick little discussion about Hood. Thanks so much for playing my more house ruled than you might have realized version of the game for the past year and a half or so. I'm looking forward to our next session.
Yes.
Me too.
Me too.
Any last thoughts that either of you want to share about this game, or kind of about the idea of what you would like to see in a Robin Hood themed role-playing game?
So if I was designing one thing I have noticed here is I want there to be some sort of like gang-wide mechanic for rich robbed, poor given, where it's a sort of thing where, hey, as you go along, if you hit, 4 gold robbed and 4 gold given, that means there will be more guards around the forest, but it also means that that innkeeper might be more likely to hide you,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. Or, hey, you've robbed so much that now the sheriff is going to be sending spies. And so, like,
Mm-hmm.
hitting the levels where things start escalating, where that is a built in mechanic, instead of it being I have to count on the game master just narratively doing that. So I know, okay, we got 4 gold in this heist. We can use it to buy everybody a nice new bow. Or if we, I know, guys, I know you guys really want that. If we give 3 gold to the poor, we hit that next level and we
Mm-hmm.
get that boon. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Actually bring the Robin Hoodiness into it as a big mechanic.
So there's a game, Goblonia. Theo, do you know the game? I gave you a copy
I
of
have a
Goblonia.
copy of it. I haven't gotten to pull it out really yet.
Yeah, so
Looking forward
Goblonia
to it.
is a game made by a good friend of mine, Robert Turk, who has appeared once on the podcast before to help us review the Errol Flynn Robin Hood film, even. And I helped play test this game kind of from start to finish, years of playtesting for this game. And it ended up being about goblins who have their own city, but it's been taken over by the High Fae, led by Queen Titania. And the goblins are kind of in revolt, but it's not a very well organized revolt. But one of the elements is you have a map of the city, and it's divided into boroughs, and there's like influence tracking that you have in the different boroughs. Where you're tracking to see like how much they're being like suppressed by Titania, how close you are to fomenting open revolt in the streets in those areas. You get benefits to being in the different areas based on how the influence has changed in those areas, if you have enemies there or not. And like you were saying, Ben, you also can spend your resources, your time or your money to improve, your influence in these areas as part of the mechanics of the game. And I think it works really well in that. And I think it would be great to see something similar in a Robin Hood role-playing game. And if nobody else makes that, I might just incorporate that my own in another recipe altering fashion the next time I run a Robin Hood role-playing game.
Not to gush more about Robert's games, but I have played a few full games of one of his others, the newly released Veil of the Failed and Fallen.
Yes, for
which
that
also,
one you were a playtester for that
I
one.
was, yeah, and it also has a similar thing of you're trying to keep track of how certain peoples of the world, like this fantasy world, and the locations are doing. Like, are these places being liberated? Are they being crushed and oppressed? Can you count on them as part of your resistance against this evil ruler that's taken over the land? And so, yeah, I like that kind of extra meta progression that you can get through a game to really help you feel like you are making a larger difference in the world as a whole.
Yeah. I think that's a great element to add to a Robin Hood game. Good suggestion, Ben. Nice call. All right, any other last thoughts?
I will also just say my experience with most role-playing games is you get the most out of it based on who you're playing with. There is no way to make a role-playing tabletop game that will get over the hump of the people you're playing with don't want to be playing this, or if everybody's there excited, engaged, you're going to get a lot out of it. There is no magic formula to this will make my friend finally like tabletop game.
Yeah.
I will say the barrier to entry in this one is a lot lower than like D&D character creation. That can help, but it also means there aren't rules that you can go check everything, check up on everything. When you say, all right, make up a new stunt, they need to be able to just like, all right, I'll make something up, and you don't have to have like a big list of stuff to pick from. So I do enjoy that part of it, but again, we're playing with some fantastic people who are, jumping in with both feet.
Yes, sometimes literally when they make a new stunt to come leaping, pirouetting off of a tree limb into a group of guards that have threatened their friends.
Yeah.
So the game that we've been discussing in this little chat is Hood Swashbuckling Adventures in Sherwood. That is published by Fearlight Games. It was written by Bryce Whittaker. And Wicked Clever Games is where you can find the ones by Robert Turk that we were also just discussing. And the main meat of this episode will have been a interview with Graham Rose, who just wrote a new Robin Hood game called The Hooded Man that is releasing later this year. Check out any of those games if you're curious. All right. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Theo.
All right, thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks again, Theo and Ben. I look forward to our next session and the resolution of that cliffhanger with the mysterious Iberians encountered on the shadowy streets of Nottingham. In addition to providing links where you can find out more about Hood Swashbuckling Adventures in Sherwood and the games from Wicked Clever Games that we mentioned, I'll also include a link to another game, one with a nice, slim, and easy-to-approach book called Sherwood, a game of outlaws and arcana from R. Rook Studio. Additionally, I will include a link to the Wikipedia article about the Rollmaster Robin Hood game from the 1980s that I mentioned at the top of the show, and a very informative page from Alan W. Wright's Bold Outlaw website that highlights his interview with the authors of Robin Hood, Adventures in Sherwood Forest and Beyond, that was written by Robert and Peggy Schrock for the GURPS role-playing system. That was where I had learned about Catherine Kerr having written that Robin Hood supplement for Dragon magazine in 1981. And of course, there will be a link to the page for The Hooded Man. Now, I can't claim any skill as an artist, but I will put a character sketch of Nicholas the Wayfarer up on patreon.com/intogreenwood. Feel free to check that out over there, and just maybe take a moment to consider if you want to become one of the fine people there who are supporting the creation of this podcast. It's hard to be a proper dice goblin when I'm barely covering the cost of my hosting fees. If you'd like to provide a one-time tip and a show of appreciation, then you can also go to buymeacoffee.com/intogreenwood to chip in a bit over there. And because there are some things even more important than buying dice, 10% of all proceeds will go to our select charity of Trees, Water, and People. Now, if you're the sort more likely to be aided by Robin Hood than robbed by him, I more than understand. Times are tough for many of us right now. But if you can take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode of the podcast with a friend, that would be an immense help as well. Now, whether you know what a THACO score is, have just dabbled in D&D, or are completely uninitiated into the hobby, we'd love to hear from you. Into the Greenwood can be found on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, all with the handle @IntoGreenwood. If you're inclined to just give social media a pass entirely, then you can just reach out over email with the address intogreenwood@gmail.com. Additionally, there is an active Discord server for all things Robin Hood related, run by friend of the show, Mike Nichols. There we will organize watch parties, play games, and we have a book club. The current book club selection is In a Dark Wood by Michael Cadnam. If you'd like an invitation, just reach out over email or social media. Into the Greenwood is produced and edited by me, Thaddeus Papke. Our theme music is by Plastic 3. That's all for now, though. So once again, I find myself wishing you all safe travels until our next journey together into the Greenwood.
It is also known that there are wondrous treasures within these mazes for those brave and clever enough to find them. Thus warned, shall ye enter?
Aye.
Let the journey begin.